My name is Yarissa. I am a clinical psychologist. So I work predominantly at CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And within the hospital, I work in what's called the Schizophrenia Division, and that's made up of a number of different services. So one of those is the Slate Center for Early Intervention, which is where I would imagine most of our focus will be today. And I also work in the complex care and recovery program. So within all of both of these programs, everybody that I've worked with have had a psychotic episode. And the work that I do specifically is for folks who have experienced a psychotic episode and who also might like to explore their substance use.
Awesome. Thank you. So I guess we can jump right into it then. Like
Okay.
what you were saying there, like a few things popped into my head, and I like the idea of like exploring substance use because that makes it into like a conversation, right? And it doesn't necessarily stigmatize the use. It allows for like people to see what it means in their own life. So I guess the question I have for you is how does like the idea of problematic use change from person to person? Because from my understanding, like there's everyone has a different context, right? So like how can one person's context be problematic when someone else might be like smoking the same amount at like the same time, so might not be experiencing the same harms.
That's a great question. So when I think about problematic use, I think about use that interferes with somebody's goals and values, or use that interferes with somebody's ability to be their best self. So I don't consider problematic use the quantity that somebody's using or the frequency at which they're using, but if their use in general is interfering with the person that they want to be or the goals that they have. So as an example, if somebody has the goal to return to school or to begin studies, and their use is interfering because it's affecting their motivation to engage in their coursework, or it's impacting their symptoms in a way that their symptoms are then interfering with their ability to engage in their coursework, then we might consider it problematic. So like you said, in the exploration, it's never about use on its own. It's more about how someone's use might be interfering with their values and their goals, the things that they want to be doing in their lives.
So you really
And
take
that,
you
yeah,
take like the whole person into account there.
very much so. So when I meet somebody, I'm not looking at them or talking to them about their illness or about their use. I want to get to know somebody, for who they are truly, what makes them tick, what fulfills them, what it is that they want in life, what it is that's important to them. And that's where we start. That's where we always start.
Awesome. So I imagine that means that like different people can have different like patterns of using, but like how their value sets and how their goals are aligned will mean that their use can be like either helpful or problematic or somewhere in between, just based off of like who they are.
That's right. That's right. I don't pretend to know what's best for somebody, and I don't pretend to know if their use is problematic or not. And I think that it takes time to get to know somebody to understand if their use is problematic or not. And
Awesome.
for
I think,
different people, it might be it's different for different people. And
yeah,
so we need to look at each person as an individual.
yeah, I think that's an amazing way to go about it because oftentimes people can fall into the camps of like either like smoking pot is like the best thing people can do and like everyone should do it, or like smoking pot's terrible and like no one should
Hmm.
do it. So I guess
Right. And then,
that
no
oh sorry.
apologies.
Yeah. I was just gonna ask, like, that leads me to think of like what are your kind of like overarching views on the substance in general? Like if you were to like just meet like the general person off the street, like what and they told you they smoke pot, like what would that mean? Like is there circumstances where it could be helpful? Is it circumstances where like you'd want to say like try and stay away from that or like what?
Hmm. Again, I don't like pretend to know what's best for an individual, and I don't have hard and fast rules about cannabis, whether it's good or bad. I think that, well, I know that there's a lot that we don't know about the brain, and there's a lot that we don't know about cannabis. So some people might talk about THC might negatively impact psychosis or potentially anxiety, whereas CBD might have helpful components for people. But again, I don't think we can make broad generalizations just yet. I think there's a lot more research that needs to be conducted for us to know what works, what doesn't work, and what's good for who. And even then, people aren't a statistic. So when we do research, we're looking at big numbers of people. And so we can make, some generalized statements, but again, I come back to the individual always in terms of what's working for them. I think, having said that, one of the difficulties is that somebody, I'm gonna use an example. So somebody who is experiencing psychosis, for them, might find that their weed use or their cannabis use in the moment helps. So it helps in some way to either reduce their symptoms, or maybe it helps to reduce the distress associated with their symptoms. So in the short term, it feels like it's helpful, and it is. I think the tricky part is that in the long term, it might be making their symptoms worse. And that's a harder part to figure out. So I think the relationship between someone's use and their mental health is tricky and complex. And I think what we might see is in short-term gains is very, very different than what we might see in terms of long-term consequences.
So how do you kind of like differentiate that then? So if someone's coming to you and they say like, this is helping with my symptoms. I feel a lot better when I smoke, and like I don't have like all of these things going on in my head that are normally there. But maybe you're like cautious that down the road that might change. Like how do you have those conversations? How does that change how you're like talking to someone about it?
Yeah. So I think in terms of immediate gains, it's very important to understand the function of somebody's use. So as you were just saying, if somebody is using because it might reduce their symptoms, so as an example, it makes my voices quieter, or it makes my voices sound nicer to me. Or like we were saying, it just reduces the distress associated. So my symptoms are still there, but they don't bother me as much. Um, Other reasons people might use is just to have fun, to connect with other people. There's a whole bunch of reasons why people might use, and so getting to know that in the moment is easier than getting to know the longer term consequences. And so to do that part, we want to look at trajectories, so helping somebody to look at times that they've used and times that they haven't, and what their mental health was like during both of those times. So either looking back, or if we have the luxury, spending a lot of being able to work with somebody for a prolonged period of time to help them track over time their use as well as their mental health.
Yeah, so that comparison over time of when maybe people first started using, they had these positive effects, and then being able to see like down the line, does that change? And like if that relationship does change, does it change for the worse?
Yeah. And helping and doing it with curiosity and compassion. So if somebody is interested in understanding or knowing more about their longer term effects of their use, then being able to play with it with somebody. So if somebody's up for it, taking a break and monitoring how they're feeling in terms of their mental health and their mood and their overall self, um, what it looks like if they're using once a week, what it looks like if they're using every day. And so working with somebody to build that curiosity so that you can together look at things over time.
Yeah, so that curiosity seems to be a big piece. So not coming into it with like the assumption that it's going to go one way or the other, but trying to have like the the desire to figure out what it is, and not to try and pigeonhole it right from the start, but to have like a holistic view on like
Right.
what it could be.
That's right. If someone comes in, as an example, to first episode clinic, and they're told by their clinician, stop using cannabis, what might happen is that, I mean, no one wants to be told what to do, so we just know that that doesn't work.
Mhm.
But what can happen is that somebody can start to argue the reasons for their use. That's just natural human instinct. And the more that we start to argue those reasons, the more that we start to believe those reasons. And so if we pretend as clinicians to know what's best for someone, what might happen is that they're going to argue the opposite, and they're going to then, more and more so believe their viewpoint. And so, yeah, telling someone what to do is the absolute last thing that we should be doing. But the
Mhm.
curiosity piece and the walking alongside someone so that we can together explore it and figure it out. I do believe that is huge. That's incredibly important.
I really like that. It's kind of like it's a discovery, right? It's people finding out things together, especially if they have someone like you in their life who can help them to figure it out. And the tool you were talking about there, or like the idea that like people create a resistance to like narratives that are pushed at them, reminds me of like motivational interviewing, which I know you're something of an expert in. So could you talk a bit about how you would use some of those techniques when you're talking with someone who wants to
Yeah,
explore their cannabis use?
yeah. I mean, a lot of it are things that we touched on already, but the idea is that we come at therapy from a place of curiosity and empathy and compassion. And like we were saying, not pretending to know what's best for somebody and not telling somebody what to do.
Hmm.
When we explore someone's goals and someone's values within the motivational interviewing framework, what often happens is that we're building discrepancy between the person that they want to be and the person that they are being. Or we build discrepancy between what they're wanting in life and how their behavior might not be helping them to achieve those things. And the more that we're able to build discrepancy, the more that somebody's internal motivation for change increases. So in motivational interviewing, we are working with someone to build their own internal motivation for change. As we were saying before, when you tell someone what to do, it's just not going to work. And so motivational interviewing helps us to get to know somebody and walk along beside somebody in a way that they are building insight into what works for them and what doesn't. And inherently, people want to be good, and people
Hmm.
want to change behaviors that are interfering with their values and their goals. And so in motivational interviewing, we're asking questions to help somebody who we're working with to figure that out for themselves rather than figuring it out for them.
Yeah, so you help guide them through realizing how what they're doing right now is different than what they want to be doing. And it's
Yeah,
that difference that lets them like get the motivation to change their behavior so that when they do have that like awareness that there is some sort of like discrepancy there, they can make a choice to act in a different way.
that's right. And so we're helping them to make their own choices in a way that best suits them.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that I think that brings together a whole bunch of ideas, and it's really an amazing way to do it because it's that whole walking alongside someone, right? Like not telling them where to go, not forcing them to make a decision, but it's really listening to them and allowing them to make their own decision and to
Yeah.
gain that awareness in their own circumstances so that the decisions they make are the best ones for themselves.
That's right. And people, I mean, the people that I work with are incredible, and then like their resiliency is incredible, and I'm in awe of people. I mean, every day, and so to be able to walk along beside someone and be with them as they explore who they are and what they want, and begin to make change associated in that way or in the direction of their values. It's a beautiful thing to witness. I mean,
Mhm.
I feel quite grateful to be able to be a part of someone's journey in that way.
Yeah, the way you speak about it, I can definitely tell you're very invested in like people's lives and like you care a lot. Yeah. So one thing I did want to ask was with this like therapeutic relationship, like a lot of this, I guess, before COVID would happen in person, right? You try and sit someone down in a room with you and like have these discussions. So how has that changed since like people have been pushed into quarantine?
It's changed tremendously. So currently, what we're doing is connecting like this. We're using, there's specific sites that we're using that are deemed to be secure because we're always at the forefront. We're always putting clients' privacy and confidentiality and safety. And so there's some platforms that are online video platforms that we're utilizing. We're also using the phone to have sessions with people. We are seeing people in person in some circumstances. So if people are very high risk, potentially because they're quite unwell, or they might be at risk of harm to themselves, we might be seeing those people in person. Or if people don't have the means to connect remotely. So some people don't have the privilege of having a phone or a computer, and still need to come into the clinic. But for the most part, we are doing as much as we can to keep people safe from exposure. And so doing as much as we can remotely wherever possible. And it's different. I mean, I find it harder to connect when I'm not face to face with somebody.
Hmm.
But this is where we are. And this
Yeah.
is, you know, this is, yeah, this is where we are right now. And so my job is to remain as healthy as I can so that I can still support others, because people very much need support during this time.
Yeah, and I know we were talking about earlier that people are really affected by this, and the people you support are really like they can really have a tough time with like all these additional stressors.
Mhm.
So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that too, and how you can help people in these times while like it's tough out there.
It's really tough out there. And, because, excuse me, there's so much unknown right now, um, in terms of the future, that can very much exacerbate somebody's anxiety, because anxiety is very much about the future and predictions about the future and catastrophizing about the future. And because we're in this world of unknown right now, some people might have uh, an increased anxiety. Um, or somebody might be experiencing an increase in their paranoia as a result of what's happening in the world right now. And so, first and foremost, is self care. Like, how do we care for ourselves in this time? I think that there are some things that are out of our control, and there are some things that are in our control. And so, the focus needs to be, what can I control? What can I be grateful for right now? What can I work on right now? How can I take care of myself right now? So, really focusing on what are the things that I can do right now that keep me well and keep me safe.
So focusing on like the very immediate present and taking that attention away from the future where like all these anxieties are, and then bringing it into like what can I do now and what is within my control.
What is within my control? And I mean, in the future, in terms of, we can still work on future goals. I might have a goal uh, to study or to get a job or to engage in a relationship, and we can still work on what are the things we can work on now that will help me to attain those goals in the future, or what can we work on now that is in line with my value direction, or the direction that I would like my life to go. And so there can be some future focus on goals and values, but we want to take away the future focus on, when am I going to be able to go outside? When am I going to be able to go to a concert? When am I going to be able to do these things? Because those are the things we don't know. But we can still work on, what do I want in the future, and how do I work to cultivate those things now?
Hmm. Yeah, and bringing it back to cannabis for a second. So I know in these times, like a lot of protective factors have been kind of stripped away from people's lives. Like if a lot of people are out of work because of the shutdowns, people can't really see their friends and family in the same way. Meaningful activity is a little harder when everyone's stuck indoors. So how do you see people's patterns of use change in these times? And do you think that like this could be like a contributor to like higher use or changes in use in general?
I think that it's different for different people. So I've seen some people have an increase in use because they're at home. They might be bored. They might be feeling anxious, and their use might be helping with that in the moment, or feels like it's helping with that in the moment. So for some people, I'm seeing an increase in use. For a lot of people, I'm actually seeing a decrease in use. For those people who might be using cannabis to engage with others socially, or might be using it to like motivate them to get out of the house, or might be using it yeah, for reasons like that. So I guess it comes back to the function of their use and the reasons why they use. And because those are different for different people, I'm seeing all sorts of different trends.
So I'm mindful of your time because I know you're busy. Was there anything else you were hoping to say or we could talk about during this?
Mm, no, not on my end. I think, if we were going to have any last, thoughts, or to leave anybody who's watching this with any last thoughts, is to know that people are inherently amazing. And if, as clinicians, we're working with people, to always come at it with this curiosity and this compassion, and not pretending to know what's best for anybody. And, coming at a therapeutic relationship with gratitude for the ability to walk beside someone as they figure things out.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I think that's an amazing place to leave it. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. It was really nice talking to you.
You too.